Okay, good morning. So we are doing today Nun Beis Amud Aleph, and we are at the about halfway down or so in the narrow lines. So yesterday, what we had just finished discussing was the fact that there was a machlokes in what Beis Shammai said. In our Mishnah, it sounded like Beis Shammai felt that when it was a situation where somebody just had one cup of wine and he had to bench and he had to make Havdalah, that the Mishnah told us that im ein shamela kait acha, right? Somebody only had one cut. So Beis Shammai said, "Mevarich al yain, v'achar kach mevarich al hamazon." First, you should make a bracha on the wine, and then you make benching. And we said that that didn't seem to work because the brayso that we quoted on Nun Beis seems to quote Beis Shammai, and it says over here, "Ve'emen le'el kais acha." If you only have one kais, minich la'achar hamazon. You essentially bench, mushash and kul achar, but then you make havdalah. Whereas from the Mishnah, it sounded the opposite. For the Mishnah, it sounded like, according to Beis Shammai, you would first make a bracha on the wine, then you would then you would bench afterwards. So it didn't seem to fit with Beis Shammai from the Mishnah. The Gemara the Gemara ends up saying that there's actually two different opinions in Beis Shammai. There's Beis Shammai according to Rabbi Meir and Beis Shammai according to Rabbi Yehuda. And this Beis Shammai is actually going according to Rabbi Yehuda and not according to Rabbi Meir. And so it doesn't fit with the Mishnah. Or I should say, it doesn't fit with the entirety of the Mishnah. The Mishnah had an aspect that does fit according to both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir. Namely, that Beis Shammai says that normally you should first make a bracha on the day and then make a bracha on the wine. The opening part of the Mishnah was Beis Shammai Aimer mevarich al hayoim, v'achar kach mevarich al hayayin. First you make a bracha on the day, and then you make a bracha on the wine. And over here, in this brisa, we had an issue with it because in this brisa it said, quoting Beit Shammai, according to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, that somebody who is making havdalah, he should first make a bracha on the wine, and then make a bracha on the eish, and the besam, and then make a bracha on havdalah, then make a bracha on the yaim. And so we said that's a contradiction for Beit Shammai. Beit Shammai says you first make a bracha on the day, and then you make a bracha on the wine. And that the Gemara answered. This is what we ended up doing yesterday. The last thing was that there's a difference between welcoming Shabbos and saying goodbye to Shabbos. When you welcome Shabbos, so then you want to do it as soon as possible. You have the most types of Shabbos, so you make you make kiddush on the yom first, and then you make a bracha on the wine. But to say goodbye to Shabbos, so first you want to again have the longest Shabbos. So first you make a bracha on the wine, and then afterwards, after you've done everything on the Eish B'Sam, then you make a bracha on the day. So it doesn't contradict the idea of Beis Shammai that the Yom is more fundamentally important. The reason that you're doing it last is not because of less importance. It's because it's so important. You want to have as much of the day as possible. So therefore, you don't say goodbye to the day and bring in the chol until the last possible moment. Okay, so that's where we left off yesterday. Just before we move on, the Taisus of Rabbi Shua, we focused yesterday on the first part of the Taisus. What's the difference between Rabbi Shua says and over here that we say in Erev and Yud Gimel that you do go with Basko for Beis Hillel. But the second part of Taisus, in the narrow line, so Taisus asks, what's the difference about Kiddush and Havdalah, where forget Beis Shammai, just the way we do it. The fact is, by Kiddush and Havdalah, the way we do it is Mavarach Kaidem al Yayin. By both Kiddush and Havdalah, the way we do, we first make a bracha on the wine, and then after we make a bracha on the wine, then we, what do you call? Then we make a bracha on the yain, right? We say Agafen, and then we say Asher Kedushanim says of Tzivanu on Shabbos on Friday night, and also on by Havdalah, the same thing. We first make a bracha on the yain, and then only then do we make a bracha on the yain for Havdalah. So Taisus is asking, why is it that for Kiddush and Havdalah we make first a bracha on the wine, and then make a bracha on the yain. When it comes to benching, we first bench, and then we make a bracha on the wine. Why don't we make a bracha on the wine first? Just have everything go the same way. So Taishas answers that there's a difference. The main difference is that by benching, it's like a hesach hadas. To first make a bracha on the yain, first make a hagafen, and then bench would be considered a hesach hadas too much, as opposed to kiddush and abdal, where you have intention to eat, to drink, and you're not sort of losing the focus when you just put in another bracha after the yain. Whereas by benching, if you first made a bracha on the yain, then you bench, it will be since you don't have no intention anymore to eat, it will be considered definitely hesach hadas, and that's why we do it first benching and then the bracha of hagef. Okay, going back now to the Gemara, a lot of Tumah V'Tahira in today's Gemara. So the Gemara asks, "V'savri beisham berchas hamazon tu'una kais." This whole assumption is presupposed that according to Beis Shammai, berchas hamazon is going to require a kais, and that's why we're talking about over here. If somebody comes to the house and he's eating and he only has one cup, does he wait till after berchas hamazon, etc.? All that is predicated on the idea that there is a requirement to use a kais when one is benching. Says the Gemara Vatanan, but we learned in the Mishnah, Balaam yain lachar hamazon. Our Mishnah told us if they have wine that comes to them after the meal. Rashi over here says that we're talking about kol yimais hashana. I'm not 100% sure why it means all the days of the year. Like what's that lafuke from what? So balaam yain achar hamazon. Wine comes to them after the meal. B'seich hamazon loy balaam. Rashi explains that there was no yet wine that came during the meal. Shigar Mr. Dustam. Now they're finishing the meal. Balaam lifnei berchas hamazon. Now they have some wine. So the question is what to do. Let's say they only have one cup of wine. So what do you do in that situation? Beis Shammai says, in that situation first, like we said in the Mishnah, if you only have one cup, first you make a bracha on the yayin, and then you make berachas hamazon. And the Gemara is asking now on this that it sounds like what? That that according to Beis Shammai, we're asking, does Beis Shammai require that berachas hamazon needs a cup of wine? So we're saying from our Mishnah, if you have only one cup of wine, what did Beis Shammai say? Beis Shammai says, "Bol and yain achar hamazon im ein sham ela isa kais." Beis Shammai amim mevarach al yain. So what does it sound like? Beis Shammai says you first make a bracha on the wine. That means you drink the wine. That means then that you don't need a wine for berachas hamazon. If you only have one cup of wine, first you make a bracha on the wine, you drink it, and then you bench. So you see, you do not need to have a bracha for. You do not need to have a cup of wine for berachas hamazon. So we're saying over here in this brayso that we quoted from Beis Shammai, Rabbi Yehuda, we said that if somebody only has one cup, they mainly right? You leave it after you bench. You don't drink from it. Then you make the whole havdalah, right? And it sounded like, what does that sound like? That sounds like there's a need, right, to make berachas hamazon on a cup of wine. But why do you have to make a berachas hamazon on a cup of wine? Here in the Mishnah it says that if you only have one cup of wine, you can first make a bracha on the wine, presumably drink it, and then bench. So you see, benching doesn't require a cup of wine. Says the Gemara, no, you're not reading it correctly. The Mishnah says the Gemara, my love, the Mavarch the Mishnah must be talking about where somebody made a bracha on the wine and he drank it, and now when he's benching, he's not having a cup of wine. So you see, you don't need a cup of wine to bench. So why are we so worried that if you only have one cup of wine, that you have to say berachas hamazon and then use it for Abdallah? Like, who cares? Just bench. You don't need to have a cup of wine for benching. Says the Gemara, no. Our Mishnah didn't mean that he had a cup of wine and he made a bracha on the wine and then he drank it. No, the mevarich eluye umanach lei. He made a bracha on the wine and he did not drink from it. And what we're saying is you have to read the Mishnah that he was mevarich al yain v'achakach mevarich al hamazon without drinking in between. That is, he made a bracha on the wine and then he benched and he never drank. Again, as we pointed out in Taisus was talking about for Basil, for the common shita, why we don't do it this way, why we first bench and then make a bracha on it. So it says, but according to Beishamai, Beishamai is clear that if you only have one cup of wine, first you make a bracha on the wine, then you're going to bench. Sounds like, oh, he says that you drink in between. Says Beisham, says the Gemara for Beishamai, no, you don't drink in between. You have a cup of wine for the benching. You make the bracha on the cup of wine. You do not drink. Then you bench using that same cup of wine. That shows you that what? That you do need a cup of wine for benching. Says the Gemara, but 1 second. You're telling me now that he made a bracha on the wine and then he leaves it over. And then he benches. But don't we say the Amar Mar Hamavarch Tzarich Sheyitim? Don't we say that when you make a bracha, you have to taste it? You have to do something. So the Gemara says, okay, the Tamla, he did taste it. Meaning he made a bracha bar pragaf, and then he had a little bit. He didn't actually drink the wine, but he had a little bit. Says the Gemara, really? The Amar Mar Ta'amai Pagmai, that if you taste it, you're being pagim in the cup. And if you're being pagim in the cup, then you can't use that cup anymore for benching. So you want to say, initially, that according to Beis Shammai, you do not require a cup of wine for benching. Why? Because presumably after he made the bracha on the wine, he drank. Mar says, no, you do need a cup of wine for benching because he didn't necessarily drink when he made the bracha on the wine. The Mar says, but don't you have to at least taste something? Mar says, okay, so he tasted something. Mar says, but if he tasted, then you're paying him the wine, then you can't use it for benching. So the Gemara says, no, the Tom Lebiyata, he didn't actually go like this with a cup of wine and drink it. That would be pagament. Instead, what he did was he poured a little bit into another cup or into his hand or something like that. So that's how he got a little bit of a taste. So if he got a little bit of a taste, and now he's being Yertzizayim that after he made a bracha on the wine, he had a little bit of a taste. So he's fulfilling the idea that I'm a Tzar Shiyitim, and he still has enough wine in order to be able to bench. And so therefore, there's no right that bracha is not to in a case. The Berachos of Moses is not to in a case according to Bisham because it's still to in a case, and he had a case. He drank something. He drank a tiny bit. He wasn't paging. He was paging because he wasn't paging because he had a little bit in his hand or in a different cup. Says the Gemara, "V'amar kaisha bracha tzarich shir, v'hakapakas le'mishiyura." But at the end of the day, in order to drink a cup of wine and be yaitzer, you have to have a shear. Whatever the shear is, it's this, that, whatever the shear might be, he has to have at least a shear. If he's saying he's time just a little bit, so how is he yaitzer the shear? You won't have enough left for benching. Says the more the Nafashlight's famous shiur. You're right; it was a big cup, so he had a te'ima which was enough, and there was still enough left for the shear for the next bracha. So therefore, all your questions go away because you wanted to try to prove that according to Beis Shammai, Birchas Hamazon is not requiring a kais. And you can see that from the Mishnah. There's no proof from the Mishnah. But the Mishnah is saying that Beis Shammai made a bracha on the wine, and he was timed the wine in a manner that still was yotz the bracha of the wine, and left enough wine to be yotz Birchas Hamazon on wine, and therefore you cannot ascertain, or you cannot prove from the fact that Beis Shammai says you make a bracha on the wine first, that the bracha of Birchas Hamazon doesn't require a kais. It still requires a kais. That's what we left off until now. So the Gemara says you're saying that he was somehow tayyim, and he had enough of a shear in order to make all this work. So he has enough of the wine, he has enough of the Birchas Hamazon, it's great. So, but look at the Mishnah again. The Mishnah said that the case was very specific. Im ein sham ela isa kais. It was a situation where a guy only had one cup. So if you only had one cup, then how are you saying he has enough for all of this? He clearly did not have enough for all of this. So furthermore, v'ha'im ein sham ela isa kais katani. Says the more trey loy have mechad nafesh. It means he didn't have enough for 2 cups, but for 1 cup it was enough to be able to be time enough and be the berachas hamazon. So let's just finish the Gemara before we go back. So the Gemara says, okay, so fine. I can't prove to you that according to Beis Shammai, berachas hamazon doesn't need a kais. It needs a kais, fine. But we have a line from Reb Chia. Reb Chia says that according to Beis Shammai, the way it worked is that you made a bracha on the yayin and you drank it, and then you bench. So this version of Beis Shammai is what? Very clear that here, according to Beis Shammai, the way he's learning, you do not need a kais for brachas hamazon. And they more, in fact, include they'll trade tanoi believe with the Beis Shammai. In other words, before we had trade tanoi Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda in Beis Shammai, whether or not, according to Beis Shammai, in the normal situation of somebody who's nichnas l'beisai, might say Shabbos and v'rach al yayin v'al amor. Somebody makes a bracha first on the yayin, and then on the eish, and then on the besamim, and then what do you call? If he only had 1 kais, then it's menichal achar hamazon. Then he would leave it for after benching because he has to bench first. And then he would do the yayin, the mar, and the besamim. He would do all that afterwards. Whereas we saw in the Mishnah that in fact that's not how this would be done. The Mishnah told us, Beis Shammai said, in a situation of Havdalah, the way you make the brachas was ner umazon besamim v'Havdalah. So it wasn't in the order that we had it. So we said, okay, there's 2 Tanoim according to Beis Shammai. But now we're saying there's again 2 Tanoim, or maybe 2 Amaran, according to Beis Shammai. And this time it's not the machlekes necessarily in the order, but in the question of whether or not berachas hamazon is doing a kais or not. Now let's take a step back. Because the Gemara here is not discussing Beis Hillel, it's only discussing Beis Shammai, but nevertheless it has big impacts on halacha, this Gemara. So first, look at Taisus Manichai Alachar Hamazon. So Taisus says that what do you do? The thinking was that if you only have 1 cup, you what are you calling it? You're waiting until after you're finished benching, right? The Minichal Achar Hamazon. So what did that mean? We weren't 100% sure what the Mishnah said. The Mishnah had said, if in ancient Malachos Achas, Beis Shammai says Mevarach al Yain v'Achar Kach Mevarach al Hamazon. You first make a bracha on the wine, and then you bench. And the question was exactly what is going on. Are you drinking? Are you tasting? How much do you have or not? So the Gemara said that maybe what you would do is you're not having anything, and you're effectively leaving it till after you bench. And if that's the case, you're leaving it till after you bench, then the assumption would be that you are not, what do you call it? That you are, the assumption was initially that you are drinking it. Right, the assumption was initially that you're drinking it. The Gemara says, again, that you made the bracha, and maybe you just put it down. And the Gemara says, no, but you have to taste it. So the question was, this manichai, if you were to leave it, that means you wouldn't be having anything. You wouldn't be tasting anything. and then you'll be making Havdalah afterwards. But the Gemara ends up saying, no, that you do taste it. And if you do taste it, then Taisa says, then Hacham Mashma Shemutter Litam Kadam Havdalah. In other words, in the way the Havamid of the Mishnah was working, the initial assumption was that if you only have one cup and you Mevarach al Yayin, V'achakim Mevarach al Hamazon, that we weren't 100% clear. If that meant that you Mevarach al Yayin and you drank from it, so that doesn't that mean that you're first drinking before you're making Havdalah? And if it means that you didn't touch it, so then maybe it means that you waited. But Taisus is saying on the way that Beis Shammai learns, which again is going to have impact on us, Lamaisa, in the end of the Gemara, it sounds like you could taste it. Again, we end up with two different Tanam Aliba de Beis Shammai. But according to one man the Amar, Reb Chia, you for sure drink it. Right, you for sure end up drinking it. Or the way the Gemara had it before Reb Chia, you for sure ended up tasting it. And there was enough in the tasting to have enough for both. But either way, it comes out that, as Taisus points out, that you're having something before you drink. And we know that the Gemara says in Avri Pesachim that you're not supposed to be asr l'toim kadim sheyado. It's asr to eat before you make Havdalah. So you might say, oh, well, this is just according to Beis Shammai. It's not relevant. No, it is relevant because of the fact that it sounds like from here that, remember, according to Beis Hillel, what did Beis Hillel say? Beis Hillel said, you mevarach al hamazon, achar כך mevarach al yain. I'm not 100% clear from that how Taisus would see that, like what the position of Beis Hillel is. But anyhow, from this line of Beis Shammai, that it comes out that you're drinking before Havdalah, Taisus says, the question from the Gemara in Avri Pesachim. Avri Pesachim, it says that you cannot eat before Havdalah, and Taisus answers that it depends. The story over there in Avri Pesachim is a story about Ameimar, that Ameimar basically, there was two mices over there with Rav Chizda's sons, and Ameimar literally went to sleep on a Motzei Shabbos without eating, in order so that he should be able to make Havdalah on wine in year one. And year two, they couldn't procure wine. So he's like, okay, so this is really Chamar Medina, and he had whatever beer they had. But he wouldn't eat. He didn't eat before he made Havdalah. And so you see from there that it's also to eat before you make Havdalah. So Tais is asking, but over here it sounds like it's okay to drink before you make Havdalah. So Tais says maybe Ameimar was sort of a machmer al atzmai. He was machmer on himself, and therefore maybe that's not normative. Lamaisa, practically in halacha, how do we paskin? So Lamaisa, as I think I mentioned this before in Reish Sadi test, it really depends practically nowadays on whether or not you normally make Berachas Hamazon ala kais. If you normally make Berachas Hamazon ala kais, then on Shalos Shudas, you are able to drink from the Berachas Hamazon, even this before Havdalah. If it's a situation where you only have one cup of wine, or as the Magen Avraham notes, you do not normally make Berachas Hamazon ala kais, so then you made Berachas Hamazon ala kais because you have a crowd of people, you have a minion of people, whatever, then it's usher to be drinking that before Havdalah, and you could be making that instead, make Havdalah on that as well, on that same cup that you use for Berachas Hamazon. You're going to ask about mitzvahs making them chavilas. So as we said already before, that's not going to be an issue because it's a situation where you otherwise aren't able to drink it. So it's a way you're able to actually use the wine. So therefore, I think that is not a concern. Now, we have a second thesis here, and the second thesis is also very relevant for practical halacha, and that is tamai pagmai. That is that when a person drinks something from the cup, he's plaguing the cup. And if he wants to use that again now for a mitzvah, he has to make the wine in that cup not be pagim. So how do you make that not be pagim? The Taisus here quotes the Yerushalmi Rabbi Yaina was tamakasa. He tasted from a cup, so he made the cup pugum. And then how was he mataking it? After he drank from the cup, he poured in a little bit of water. Oh, yeah. And therefore he was able to be mataking it by pouring in something you may have seen growing up or by various tishim. That's what you have a kais pugum, they pour in a little bit of wine or a little bit of water, so now it's not a kais pugum anymore. That is the way Tais brings down from the Yerushalmi. Not all Rishonim agree with this. Some Rishonim say that the way to be make sure to matak in a cup that's pogum is what you do is you take the cup that's pogum, right, which has already been drank out of it, and then you pour the pogum kais into the kankan. You pour it back into the pitcher or the what do you call it? The bottle. When you pour it back in the bottle, so then since it's coming in, so a little bit at a time. So we say kama kama is mitaken, that as it comes in, each little bit that's coming in is going to be mitaken, now becomes usable. Obviously, it's a situation where there's stuff in the bottle where you're not pouring in more than what's, there's a Bach here in Kuf Peches, Kuf Beis, I think. The Bach writes that, so the Bach writes, yeah, it's in Kuf Beis, the Bach writes that to be Yetzirah all the days, that's what you should do. You should first be mitaken the cup by pouring in wine or water into the cup. So then, according to some sheetahs, that's already mitaken. Then you take that cup and you pour it into the kankan and do it slowly to kind of all the sheetahs there. Then everybody agrees that you could then pour back that wine into now your becher and be using it for mitzvahs. No issue with that at all. Okay. Continues the Gemara. So now going back, so we have a bunch of Tum V'Tahara in the Gemara today. So besides the Gemara, Beishamai Omer, Beishamai says, Naitel Yadayim, V'achar Kach Moizgan Esakais. First, Beishamai says you're doing the Tilas Yadayim, and then you are Moizig the curse. Then you pour the diluted the wine. Why? Shemata Omer Moizgan Esakais Techila. Because if you say that first, you're going to dilute the wine first. You're going to go pour that before you wash your hands. Gezerah shem yitmu mashkin she'achere akais. There's a gezerah that maybe the mashkin, maybe the liquid that is falling on the side of the kais, is going to be mitame you. Shem yitmu mashkin she'achere akais machmas yadav. The gezerah that maybe the mashkin that's on the side of the kais, that's fallen off on the side of the kais, is going to be mitama because of your hands. Then it's going to come along and be mitama the kais. Now you're going to say, well, why is the liquids on the side of the kais going to come along and be mitama the kais based upon your hands? So the Gemara says, why are you saying this gezerah shema yitbu mashkin she'achari hakais machmas yadav? Somehow the mashkin that is spilled off on the side of the kais is going to become tam because of your hands, and therefore it's going to become tam of the kais. Just say v'litmu yadayim l'kais. Just say that your hands are going to be tam of the kais. Why not just say that straight? So the Gemara says no. Your hands, yadayim shniyos hein. Your hands are shniyos. In other words, they're not really tamid per se. That in itself is a gezerah. And it's not going to make anything become tameh unless there's some liquid in between. So therefore, what we want to ensure is that if your hands have now been washed, if your hands are no longer tameh, so now you washed your hands, you dried your hands, and now they're totally okay. So now any wine that's going to be spilled out on the side of the kais is not going to become potentially impure and therefore susceptible to making the kais tameh. Whereas if your hands were not washed. So then they go there because they're that they're shnias. So then they touch the mashkin, they can make the whole thing tameh, and therefore we wanted to avoid that problem. Therefore, we said you should first wash your hands. That's Beis Shammai's opinion. Beis Hillel disagreed. Beis Hillel says no, you don't wash the hands. When in fact you do is you pour the cup and you don't touch your hands at all. Afterwards, you wash your hands. Beis Hillel, I remember, first you are going to be diluting the wine, and then you're going to be washing your hands. Why is that? Because if you're going to say that first you should be neitel yodayim first, so then gezer shem yitu mashkin should be yodayim machmas hakais. So maybe you wash your hands, not 100% fully dry, and guess what? Now you're going to be mitama the mashkin in your hands because of the kais. And your hands are not going to become tamei again. So you haven't gained, according to Beis Hillel, to go and wash your hands. You're going to cause yourself other potential issues. Better to keep your hands dry. So Gemara says, well, according to Beis Hillel, because so maybe then just having even your regular dry hands, but if they touch the kais, and it can't that make it tamei? The way Beis Shammai said that yadayim are shniyos. So then can't it make it tamei without it being clean? It says Beis Hillel, no. Ain't clean mitama adam. A kli is not going to mitama a person. If the hands are dry, there's no issue with that. You're going to make yourself open to a question if you're going to make your hands wet and then potentially not have them dry and then cause potentially a tummy issue. But if your hands are fully dry, and there's no concern that you have to go to wash your hands before you mazik the kais. Says the Gemara, mashkin let there be a concern that maybe it's good. We're talking here about the whole time about the wine that's falling out on the side. Why are we mentioning the wine inside the cup itself? Says the Gemara, it's going to come out a situation where the kli could be tummy on the outside. The only the inside is okay, but the outside is where we have the issue. And so therefore, that's where our focus has been fundamentally on the idea of the wine coming off on the sides. That's where the tumah could come about. It's an an because we learned the Brachot taught us kli shenidmu acher b'mashkin. If you have a kli where the sides of it are tamei, so then acher of tamei, as we turn the page to nun beis and beis, then the sides of it are what's an issue. But teichai v'ognai v'oznai v'yadav tahirin. But all other aspects of the cup, right? But especially the inside of the cup, or the handle, or other parts, those are all going to be tar. Again, the reason for the focus here on the achleira, on the wine that's coming out onto the side, that's going to potentially be causing the issues, is because that's what we're saying, that's where we're situating the tamei. We're not worried about the inside. The inside is not tamei at all. And again, just to make sure we haven't perhaps made it clear enough, that all of these are tumas that are d'Rabbanan, right? None of this here is in the Araisa. These are all gezeres d'Rabbanan, as Rashi notes a number of times here. And so the question then becomes, in terms of the gezeres d'Rabbanan, how did Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel respond to it? Beis Shammai thought the better way to respond to it is by washing your hands first. Beis Hillel says, no, the better way is by keeping your hands dry, not washing your hands first. Fine. Says the Gemara, Nidma taichai, if it was a situation where the inside of the cup was actually already tamei, so then nidma kulei, so then this conversation wouldn't happen, because then the rest of it would also become tamei. It's a situation where only on the sides it's tamei. That's how the cup itself can remain okay. Now we go back to discussing our machlokes that we had initially between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, that's causing Beis Shammai to say that you wash first. And Beis Hillel says that you first are Meisik first. Well, says the Gemara, but my kamiflagi, what is the machlekes between Misham and Misil predicated on? Says the Gemara, Beishamai Savri, Asher Lishtamish Bekli, Shenidmu Acher B'mashkin. Misham says that it's usher to be mishtamish with a kli. It's forbidden to use a kli, that the outsides of it are tamei, with liquid. Why? Gezerah mishum nitzaitzes, because we're afraid that those drops will get on you, and again, will because the hands are tamei as shnias, then it's going to cause a situation where you're essentially going to now cause the tumah to be nisaira, and as a result, the solution for Beishama is to first wash your hands. The lekel of mixer shemiyitmu amashkin shebiyadayim because, and according to Beishama, it's not going to be a situation where you're going to make a gezerah that maybe the hands will be wet and therefore be in the time of the case. We're not worried about that. Once you wash your hands will be nice and clean. And the chashash that we have then about your yadayim being shnias and therefore becoming tummy from the nitzaitis in the cup are not here. But if your hands are not washed, then your hands are shnias. So then, since your hands are going to be tummy, they're going to cause a problem for those nitzaitis that are on the sides of the cup. Basil Savri, no. Mutil ishtamish b'klishanin machar v'mashkin. Basil says if your hands are dry, obviously you didn't wash them, so he says you can be moist the kais. And the situation that we have over here, where you have a kli that again on the sides of it, it could be tame, and you have nitzaitis that came out. So Basil says I'm not worried about it. Basil Savri mutil ishtamish b'klishanin machar v'mashkin. You could be mishtamish with a kli where the sides of it are tameh, because the idea that it's spilled on the side and then you're going to be touching it and then causing there to be tameh, I'm not so worried about it. But there is a fear that if you went to now wash your hands wouldn't be dried. So then, by definition, then your hands are going to be touching the mashkin, going to be touching the kais, and therefore you could create a problem. In a more likely scenario, this is the opinion of Beis Hillel. So, all of that are all gezeres d'Rabbanan about tumah v'tahara. But now we have another reason, which becomes again a practical difference in halacha. What's the practical difference in halacha? What's the machlekes? Davar acher, there's another opinion. What's the other opinion? The opinion is as follows: Take it from netilas yadayim seuda. Right after you wash, you should eat. Take it from netilas yadayim seuda. Right after you wash, you should eat. If you look at the Gemara Pesachim on Kuvav, the Gemara says that if somebody washes their hands, they shouldn't make kiddush. What does that mean? So everyone is familiar that there is a concept with the Yegis. They wash their hands before kiddush. That's the Ramah. The Ramah there in Reish Ayin Aleph. That's what he says is the normative halacha, right? That is what a person should do. So what are we saying? We're saying that take it from the netilas yadayim, so that right after a person washes the netilas yadayim, they should have their meal. So the Gemara says, "My davar acher." What do we mean when we say this is a second pshat of Beis Hillel? Is a davar acher, another pshat? What's this other pshat that Beis Hillel is adding? Hakli karmalu Beis Hillel Beishamai. Beis Hillel is saying to Beishamai, you're saying that you should wash and then be moisty the kais. But I say to you, says Beis Hillel, no, it doesn't make sense. According to you, that says that you're worried about your hands are shnias if you didn't wash them, and you're worried about the nitzitzis that's going to touch them and therefore cause the problem of tumah. Because I tell you, no. I feel haki ha'adifa to take up the netilas yadayim suda. I think that once you make netilas yadayim, you have to immediately eat. And you're making netilas yadayim, and then you're making kiddush, and then you're having a hole in between. He says, I think that if you make netilas yadayim, you have to eat immediately. Now, it happens to be in the Gemara Pesachim, The Gemara Pesachim seems to indicate that was a situation where you were first. What the Gemara Pesachim seems to indicate that what happened was that you were first. You were in a situation where you were first. Um, um, the Gemara seems to indicate that over there, when you washed, you were going to make kiddush on bread, not on wine. So then you'd be accomplishing both. Right? You get two birds with one stone. And that is actually the way it's understood, I think, in Shulchan Aruch, that that's the common thing. If you want to wash before the meal, then make kiddush on bread. But to wash and then make kiddush on wine, so then it's not taken from Tias Daim Suda. The Ramah says that, nevertheless, as I say, the normative Ashkenazi practice is to wash before the meal and then you make kiddush. And that's for situations that have second chadas. Well, we'll get more into that later. Okay, stop.